The very capable Cardano Foundation wants to get us to 1 billion users. That's billion with a B. Ready? Let's go. I really think we've got the right person leading the Cardano Foundation. As in all things, it's always about the jockey and not the horse. And the important thing about the jockey is how they think. Because how you think really determines who you'll be. And the kinds of planning that are going on in the Cardano Foundation right now really seem to be perfect for where Cardano is currently and where we all want it to go. In this recent video from the Cardano Foundation, we found out some things from the CEO of the foundation, Frederick Gregard here. I don't think it's any kind of like hidden secret that there are certain regulatory advantages to a crypto project. If you're contemplating having to deal with US regulators, say, like the SEC, there are certain advantages to this structure where you have a foundation in Switzerland. And for a lot of lesser ecosystems, it would be enough to just have the foundation, make it powerless and put people into the foundation who aren't really going to do anything. That would be kind of like the good enough strategy, the strategy of mediocrity. But in Cardano, they always do everything 110% the best way. They always do the most optimal thing. They never do anything good enough. They never do it halfway. They always do things the most legitimate, the most valid way. And they've done that with the Cardano Foundation. Instead of making it this weak, powerless organization, they put a real guy with real experience at the head of the Cardano Foundation, a guy who's going to do things. And that's Frederick Gregard. And he told us in this video exactly what they plan on doing, and it's ambitious. So he starts out by giving us the mission of the Cardano Foundation. And even this is pretty significant. He says, we want Cardano to become the future financial and social operating system for the generations to come. So we knew all about the financial part. We knew Cardano was being built for generations to come. Charles has said all this many, many times. His mission, of course, is to create a transfer of wealth to the developing world and create financial rails to create an equal playing field for the developing world and the developed world. But we haven't heard a lot of talk about this social operating system. And I actually think this is the more interesting part of the mission, like creating new financial rails that are more fair to everyone. I think that's really important. But as the social operating part is extremely interesting. And I think this is the first time that I personally have noticed someone so central to the Cardano ecosystem come right out and put the social operating piece on an equal footing with the future financial rails piece. Fred lays out for us the general areas they're going to engage in, and they're predictable. They're exactly what you think they're going to be. I think it's really notable, however, that legislative standards is number 2. This is the regulatory piece. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I love that the Cardano Foundation is so focused on the regulatory piece. I really think in crypto, it's a good example. The whole crypto space is going to be a good example of the old maxim that the rules make the game. If you don't play to the rules, you're not going to be optimizing your performance in the game. And the rules in the case of crypto are rapidly evolving. They're rapidly changing. We're probably going to see a lot of regulation in various ways over the next 10 years. As crypto gets bigger and bigger, regulatory authorities are going to take note, and they're going to come up with all kinds of regulatory frameworks, which will be good and bad and everything in between for crypto. And the fact that the Cardano Foundation is focusing so much on the regulatory piece, I think is really important. They know that the rules make the game, and so they're going to pay very, very close attention to the rules and how those rules will be shaped over the next decade or so. Then Fred went from the general to the specific, and he got right down to the 2021-22 goals. In a second, we're going to go over his 2023 to 2024 goals and his 2026 goals, which are very interesting. We're not going to do the typical YouTuber thing where we just read slides that someone else already read to you in a video. We're just going to talk about the significance of these things. So going counterclockwise on this slide, a lot of these things are things that you are going to recognize and they won't be unexpected. He made a really good point about this second item going counterclockwise there, increasing the quality of voting and proposals in Catalyst. Fred pointed out that Catalyst has 200,000 voters and that really makes Catalyst the largest government in the world without a nation state. Think about that for a second. Catalyst, and Catalyst is really Cardano. It's a big piece of Cardano. It's almost synonymous with Cardano governance at this point. So the Cardano governance system is the largest government in the world without a nation state. That's already a huge accomplishment in and of itself, and they want to improve on that. He talked about creating better portal for developers. I think we all know that that's necessary, and I think they are actually going to make huge strides in that area, including the next item, which is about libraries and tools. And then we got this gigantic last item, onboard 50 banks. Fred is talking about onboarding 50 banks in the 2021 to 2022 timeframe. What's really significant about this is that it would be easy for a lot of different blockchain projects to claim they want to do this, right? It's real easy to set goals. It's real easy specifically to set unrealistic goals. But Fred has a background in the finance industry. He actually understands banks. This guy actually has the capability to do this. He could actually onboard 50 banks. And even though onboarding banks maybe that's not exactly why we all signed up for crypto in the first place. We're basically trying to unbank everybody. But if you onboard 50 banks to Cardano, you're going to see a pretty big impact on the connectivity, the interoperability between Cardano and the legacy systems. And I think deep down we all realize that even though there's this crazy, destroy banking kind of ethos that was present in the early days of crypto, I think we all really knew it was going to be more of a transition where we connect to the banks become connected to crypto, and slowly crypto becomes more and more prevalent until we reach this goal of providing more equal financial rails for everybody. Here are Fred's goals for the 2023-2024 time period. And again, I'm not going to read these to you. These are all things that you would expect from the Cardano Foundation. And I am sure they're going to do things that we're all really going to appreciate on all of these items. However, to avoid doing the thing that people love to do in commentary where they read things that have already been read to you, let's focus on the highlights here. I think one of the most interesting things is this second counterclockwise item, onboard 3 Fortune 500 companies to hold ADA. This is really interesting, and we'll encounter this theme a little bit later in this presentation from Fred. But the Cardano Foundation realizes there's value in doing the Michael Saylor thing. There's this value in what ADA can already do. ADA can already do a lot of the things that guys like Michael Saylor talk about when they encourage all these companies to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheets. ADA can do all those things and so much more, but it can already do these things. We don't even need Alonzo for ADA to fill this role. And I think it's smart of the Cardano Foundation to consider that a lot of progress could be made by just doing those things, just doing the Michael Saylor thing, just getting companies to hold ADA. Here's the big one we've really been waiting for, 2026 and beyond high-level goals. Fred is telling us they want to have 1 billion users. 1 billion users. This is huge. So this should be exactly the kind of thing the Cardano Foundation is focused on. How do we get to 1 billion users? And he'll go into more detail on their strategy to actually execute on this. But I think it's important. This is the foundational thinking that's important. It's not sort of like, let's grow wallet addresses to an indeterminate amount, even though they're trying to do that as well. It's not, let's provide as many services to users as possible. It's something very specific, a very specific goal that everybody would be happy about. Let's get to 1 billion users. This is one of the most interesting things from this video. Another very interesting thing is the goal in the 6 o'clock position, a decentralized protocol stack. And what he kind of implies with this is all the things that would come with Voltaire. He's talking about protocol decisions being made by the community via Voltaire. And this is sort of the transition of power theme that we haven't talked about a lot. It's been known to all of us that one day the community would be in charge of the ecosystem. And that includes the community voting on protocol decisions. Right now, those are kind of in the hands of IOHK. IOHK is kind of deciding the direction of the protocol stack. But the plan all along, and it's a credit to IOHK that this has been a plan they've had from the start, and Charles has talked about this a million times, that one day those decisions would be turned over to the community. So one of the beautiful things about good leaders who believe in decentralization of power is their ability to risk not being a part of the future. And I think we're super lucky in Cardano to have founders of the ecosystem who were willing to make that same decision, which in a lot of ways is very selfless. And I'm not trying to imply in any way that any of these items we're not covering in as much detail are not important. I think getting 10 Fortune 500 companies onboarded, very important. Creating a suite of services for a nation, very important. It's just more, it's more of a strategy. It's more of a strategy to get to the end goal. They're like things we need to accomplish to get to the end goal that are kind of expected. Like we already know they're building out a suite of services for nation level actors. They've already built out the Atoll Prism DApp for the Ethiopian Ministry of Education. We already know they would love to onboard Fortune 500 companies. So don't think I'm saying these things are unimportant. I'm just saying they fit into a different category of goal. This graph lays out what Fred points to as the Cardano Foundation Battlespace. And it lays out sort of this distinction between what they call the Cardano standard and the ADA standard. Cardano standard is on the y-axis here, ADA standard is on the x-axis. And the ADA standard on the x-axis kind of represents programmable finance and the capabilities, the institutional capabilities, and what ADA can do right now. If they go to a commercial enterprise, a company, a large company, what can ADA do right now for that type of institution? How can we increase their capabilities as an institution? And I think Fred is right when he points out ADA can already do a lot of things. We've already talked a little bit about the whole Michael Saylor thing. It's like what Bitcoin is doing for El Salvador. Cardano can already do all these things, and that falls under this label ADA standard. Then you get this other standard, the Cardano standard. And the Cardano standard kind of represents all the tools that will be added to Cardano in the future. Voltaire and Gauguin and Alonzo, all the things that will come that can lead to the integration of Cardano into society. All the really cool things that Cardano can do for almost like individual users. Those kinds of solutions would be really exciting to talk about. That's the Cardano standard. And Fred points out that the Cardano Foundation is focused on the ADA standard for institutional adoption, but they're also focused on the Cardano standard for regulation, legislative standard, and really, he doesn't put it this way, but really lobbying purposes. It's becoming apparent, one of the responsibilities of the Cardano Foundation is to try as much as possible to influence regulation in a direction that's good for Cardano. Again, this is having a good jockey that's doing the right foundational thinking. They know the rules make the game, so we should try to mold the rules that come in the future so that they're beneficial to us, so that the game is beneficial to us. I think this is really important. This is really important thinking. But it's not all just self-serving. I think a lot of the activities of the Cardano Foundation on that regulatory lobbying front will really benefit the whole space. Fred points out that a lot of the institutions they're interacting with already, one of the things they're most concerned about is regulatory certainty. Cardano has sort of always understood this, that large institutions are only going to use crypto products if there's regulatory certainty, if they know that there's not going to be some sweeping new regime of regulations that make it impossible for them to use crypto. They're not going to invest in something that's going to be regulated out of existence. So I think the Cardano Foundation's function on the regulatory front will probably end up benefiting the entire crypto space. But Fred doesn't just lay out goals and ambitions, he also tells us their strategy for achieving these goals. So they have this two-tiered approach. On the one side, they have this label center of excellence, on the other side, markets and growth. And they kind of think of the center of excellence category of activities as the Cardano Foundation's role in sort of spearheading the endeavor of showing the art of what's possible, showing the world the awesome, miraculous, interesting things that Cardano and crypto can provide to society. On the markets and growth side, what we're really talking about is all the things that need to be done to actually enable the growth, not necessarily architecting the growth, but doing the things that will actually enable the growth. How do we actually get to 1 billion? What practical things need to happen to generate that real demand? And he points out there's an interplay between these two things. He talks about, he gives this example of an NGO operating in the developing world and finding out that they want to distribute, assets to, say, a farmer in the periphery of some country, very difficult to get to. This farmer has no bank account. They want to get assets into the hands of that farmer, but then at the same time, they have these transparency duties. And it becomes very expensive to create transparency when you are trying to get assets into the hands of someone with no bank account. How do you prove that you gave assets to that farmer if there's no kind of paper trail, digital trail, because he doesn't have a bank account? And he points out that this kind of need from the market can feed from the market and growth side. Something they learn on the market and growth side, something very practical, can feed back in to the side on the right, the center of excellence, the exploring the art of what's possible, by creating this goal of creation of mechanisms for NGOs to more inexpensively more inexpensively attain transparency, basically prove that they're doing all the right things with the money, the sort of charitable funds they've been given. At this point, Fred kind of reframes how we should approach the goals of the Cardano Foundation. And he says, really, the goal of the Cardano Foundation is to de-risk decentralization for regulators and organizations. This kind of makes sense. For the entire crypto space to grow and move forward, one of the big impediments to that growth is the perceived risks of decentralization. And we see this with both organizations and regulators. We want regulators to be comfortable with decentralization, and we need organizations to be comfortable with decentralizations. And the way they're going to achieve this is through a little bit of a restructuring of the Cardano Foundation. They're going to have advisory boards for each of these categories you see here: regulatory outreach, operators, industry steering, community, science, and tech. Along with these advisory boards, there will be a council, an executive team, and there will be departments and clusters in each of these categories here underneath the executive team. So when you hear people talking about the legal and outreach cluster at the Cardano Foundation, you'll know it has to do with this. And with that, I will talk to you tomorrow.